Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Because today is the last day of this year of 2017, I'll be doing a reflection video, aka top 10 books that I read this past year in 2017. So some of these books I have already read and reviewed them with Emily, so you can definitely check those out as we go along the way. But yeah, let's get started. So as I go down this list, it will be in no particular order, so it's not like I ranked them or anything. But the first book I picked is Just One Day by Gail Forman. Actually, I'm picking the whole series in general. I absolutely love these books. There's two books plus a novella at the end. I actually gave a brief description in my Sagittarius horoscope video, so if you want to check that out, you can definitely go see what the second book is about. Basically, this book is about this fateful encounter between a girl and a boy, Allison and Willem, and somehow they spend this one day in Paris, and it was basically this magical day that both of them had, and somehow things occurred and they're separated, and the whole book follows along the story of Allison, and as she tries to struggles with who he really was and what happened at the end of the day and etc. I don't really want to go into it because I don't want to have any spoilers, but I love this book. You guys have no idea. I remember reading it and I went back and reread it again because it was so good. It was one of those books where it just tugged at your heartstrings and really made you feel as if you really believe in destiny and fate and whatnot. So that's my first pick. My second pick is actually a trilogy. It's called the Fire and Thrones trilogy by Ray Carson. I absolutely adore this trilogy. I think I read this via audiobook, by the way, and I don't know, maybe they narrated a fantastic job in narrating all the characters and all the different voices, but that part was fantastic. Definitely recommend it in audio form. But this book basically follows along the story of a girl called Lisa. She is a princess, and somehow she was born with this godstone, which is this huge piece of jewel in her belly button, and with this godstone she's supposed to have this great destiny, but she doesn't know what this destiny is. She has no guidance whatsoever, and in the first book she gets sent off to marry this other king, so she becomes this queen of a foreign nation. And this book really is so good. I don't really know what to say, but you see her struggles as she becomes this queen, and she's trying to figure out her destiny and what this godstone means to her in terms of her status in life. The one thing that really stood out to me is that Lisa, in the beginning, she actually struggled with weight, which is why I really liked her as a character, because she became very relatable to me. She was this doted on princess before she got married, and she had everything given to her. So she struggled with a lot. She was this big girl, and she never really considered herself as beautiful or whatnot, and I feel like that really helped her become more confident as time went on, because she knew that they weren't expecting certain things from her in that regard. Lisa was a fantastic character. I love all the other characters in this book as well. But that is all I'm going to say about this book, because I really don't want to spoil it any more than it is necessary. But that was definitely one of my top picks of this year. So the third book I picked for this time around is actually a huge hit among the YA crowd. This time it is The WARCROSS by Mary Lou, and I remember I got this book with Emily at BookCon, and that line to get the ARC copy was ridiculously long. I think we waited, or really she waited for like 2 hours or so while I tried to find other books, but that line was intense, and it was worth it. I personally thought it was worth it. I love the book. It basically follows the story of Emika Chen, who is a hacker, and there's this whole virtual reality right now in this certain world called WARCROSS, and it just follows a story about how she somehow gets involved with this whole WARCROSS championship. But I love this book. I thought it was really interesting, especially the relationship between Hideo, which is the WARCROSS's creator's leader, and Emika, obviously. I don't think this is a spoiler, because everyone knows in YA there's always going to be a love interest and a love romantic relationship at the end of the day, so I don't think that's a spoiler whatsoever. But if you want to learn more about this book and see what Emily and I thought about it, definitely go check out our video right there. But that's all I'm going to say about it, because I do have a video already, so moving on to my fourth book. Alright, the fourth book was definitely a book that was extremely hyped up, and I mean, I loved it, so that's why it's on this list. I believe it came out a few years ago actually, but it is The Six of Crows Duology by LEIGH BARDUGO. And Emily and I already read this book, by the way, so check out that video if you haven't already. I think the world that LEIGH BARDUGO created was very captivating. I mean, this is why the Grishaverse trilogies and the Six of Crows duology is such a huge hit, because it's her writing style. You're able to get sucked into this world immediately. Not to mention the characters were phenomenally written, they were well developed. The plot, of course, so much plot. It's a huge action book as well, action fantasy book, so there's a lot of that going on, and there is a bit of a romance involved as well, which is also great. But I'm not going to say too much about this book again because Emily and I already read and reviewed it. So moving on to number 5. So the 5th book I picked this time around is the book If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. I actually talked and discussed about this book a few videos ago. I don't remember which, but I'll link it up below. I'll link it above so you guys can see which video I'm talking about. But essentially, I read this book or listened to this via audiobook, and it was so good. It is a book about a transgender guy who went to a girl. His name is Andrew, and then now he is Amanda, and she is now in this high school setting, trying to figure out her new life with this new identity, literally. And I felt like the author did a wonderful job in crafting this novel, as well as I think also because I listened to it via audiobook, the narrator did a really good job in capturing all the emotions, all the relationship dynamics between Amanda and her new classmates, as well as, you know, like the struggles about being a transgender person. And I felt like when I was reading this book, the reason why it got to me so much is because I don't think there's that many novels out there about transgender. I know there's a lot about the LGBT community in general, but specifically transgender, I feel that it's not a really heavily touched upon topic. So when I picked this book up, I was very intrigued to see what this book would be about, and I absolutely adored this book. I think this book is fantastic and everyone should read it, not just because it's really well written, but also because you learn so much about transgender people in general. So definitely recommend it. Plus I think the author herself is a transgender, so I feel like her struggles were really well integrated into this book. But moving on to book number 6. So the 6th book is a fantastic book as well. I mean, these are my top 10 books of this year. But it is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Emily and I have already read and reviewed this book, so check that out if you have not already. But this was definitely one of the best books I've read. Plus, I listened to it via audiobook. I realized a lot of the books I picked this time around were through audiobooks, but sometimes the narrator can really break or make the book. So anyways, the audiobook was actually narrated by Trevor Noah himself, and because I think it was his life story, I think he did a fantastic job because he's a comedian anyways. So a lot of the short stories that made up the book were hilarious. So the book are essentially a bunch of essays that Trevor Noah wrote a while ago, and they're all short stories of his childhood. And because he grew up in South Africa, a lot of those situations are not necessarily what I grew up here in America was like. So it was really interesting for me to read what his childhood was like, and plus with his comedian aspect as well. That really helped make this book really interesting, just because not only was it a great read, but it was also a fantastic and funny read as well. So I highly recommend it. I don't know how much else I can say about this book, but it is so good. So if you haven't read it already, definitely go check it out. Moving on to my, seventh book? Yeah. So the next book I picked is Small Great Things by JODI PICOULT, and honestly, she's also one of my top favorite authors of all time, alongside with Kristen Hanna. But anyways, so this book essentially follows the story of Ruth, who is African American as well as a nurse, and because of circumstances with a newborn who is actually a child of a white supremacist couple, this whole fiasco happens because somehow this newborn dies under her care, and she is now faced with a serious crime of neglect, and it's basically a racial discrimination crime that she's facing. And this book was absolutely phenomenal. I remember reading it and getting so into it. This book was so good. It really, in the beginning, it definitely started off a little slow, I think, but as it picked up, it got so, like, I became so engrossed with it. There were just so many layers upon layers that you really have to dig into, and then you find out as the book continues, and each layer that you reveal was just fantastic. But I'm not going to talk too much about this book because, again, Emily and I have reviewed this book in the past, so check out our video to read more. Check out our video to watch more about the synopsis as well as what we thought about it. But obviously I love this book, this is why it's on the list. So moving on. So the 8th book that I picked for my top 10 book list is the Diviners series by LEIGH, and essentially I'm going to talk about the first 2 books because the 3rd book just came out. I have not touched it yet, and there is a 4th book on the way. So I absolutely adore this book. I think the characters were fantastic. Evie, Jericho, Theta, everyone else were phenomenally written. I also love the fact that it was set in the 1920s, even though I'm not a huge fan of historical fiction, but I do love the lingos like Ducky and like everything else. But the plots were really intriguing as well. There were like ghost stories, lots of supernatural occurrences, etc. And honestly, this book was very fast paced, so I never felt that it got boring or whatever. So I definitely recommend this book if you're into fantasy, supernatural abilities, set in the 1920s, that kind of stuff. Definitely recommend. Moving on to my next pick. So the next pick I picked is Heartless by Marissa Meyer, and I'm sure everyone who read this book absolutely adored it because I definitely did. And actually Emily and I reviewed this book as well, so check out that video if you have not already. This book is essentially the backstory of the Queen of Hearts and what made her become the Queen of Hearts. And I feel like that's enough of synopsis right there, but this book was so wonderfully written. The characters were really well developed. The plot was so good. Everything about this book was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. That's all I'm gonna say about this book. Moving on. Alright, my final pick for this list is Pachinko by Lee. Obviously, for those who have not watched our video already would know that this was definitely one of the top books that I loved, that I read this past year. And it is so good. It is, I feel like I follow Lee on Instagram, and every time I go on Instagram, all I see are her pictures and the book pictures and everything else. So I feel like Pachinko had just been on my mind this entire time. Plus I believe it's on the New York Times bestsellers. Like, I feel like it's really highly acclaimed right now and it's everywhere. But this book definitely is so good. It follows the story of this Korean family who are immigrants in Japan, and specifically I believe this is set during World War II as well. So it's a really good read. It's kind of a generational saga, so it's definitely not a book that you can read within a few hours. It's a book that you actually really have to absorb within a few days, because it's a very thick book as well. But there was never a boring moment. I think the entire time when I was reading it, I actually look forward to going home to like pour over this book because it's so good, and the writing style was top notch for sure. But that's all I'm going to say about this book, because Emily and I already did an intense book discussion video on it, so check that out if you have not already. Alright, that is it for my top 10 books that I read for 2017. I hope this has concluded this year in a wonderful, positive way for everyone as well. So please do comment down below if you have read and agreed with any of the books I had mentioned, and if you haven't, let me know as well. I'm curious to see everyone's opinions on these books I picked. But that is it for today, and if you like this video, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe down below, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But that is all I have to say for today, and Happy New Year, guys! Bye!